Let's discuss our alignment or posture. Knowing that it is meant to be very dynamic. There is no perfect position, and we're not meant to hold our muscles stiffly in one position and kind of lock down, because we have to be dynamic. We have to accept the loads that are being put on us and the movements that we're doing throughout our day. But with that being said, there is a design to our body that causes all of our muscles to be in their ideal length tension relationship, so they work the best of their ability. And I often talk about the core, of course. That's what I bring in, which relies a lot on where your ribs are and where your pelvis is in space. So that's a really good example. So then life becomes your exercise. Once you really think and start to become aware of how you habitually hold your body, or maybe positions that you get into that might turn certain parts of your body off, then using the different positions and adjusting a little bit, making little shifts here and there, little by little, will make your body use all these muscles throughout the day. So you don't have to sit down and do an hour of exercise to get stronger. You actually get stronger because you're using them. Okay. So enough talking, but let's start. Let's just look at the feet, okay? Feet are meant to be relatively straightforward. Just kind of look down at your feet and see, do I have a tendency to turn one out? Are they both turned out? Kind of just, are my arches flat? Are my arches really high? Just kind of look at your feet and see if you can adjust them to be relatively straightforward, just because we're doing this active alignment check and kind of just becoming aware of our bodies. So see what that feels like. And then up, and your weight should be in the middle of your foot, not way back in your heels and not way in your toes. So kind of feel that weight shift and find, oh yeah, okay, I feel solid. My weight is kind of in that middle part of my foot and my foot is grounded into the ground. Now if you come up by your knees, make sure those knees, turning your feet, if they knocked your knees in, we don't want that either. So just adjust. Your knees should be relatively open and pointed straight forward and not locked back and hyperextended. That's a very common position that we fall into just because the body finds more stability. It's like, okay, if I'm feeling unstable or weak or things aren't kicking in well, I'm just gonna lock my knees and just hang out on the bones and the ligaments and not have to worry about it. It's not something you do consciously, but the body just finds strategies. So think about that. Okay, are my knees locked or are my knees pretty soft? But now we get into the fun stuff. So going into the pelvis, I'm gonna turn to the side. We have, if you put your hands on your hips, we have a range of pelvic motion, right? Where you can tuck your tailbone under you and pubic bone forward, and you can see what that does to my body. I kind of tuck my glutes under, my back, my spine becomes pretty flat, my pubic bone comes up, and I kind of get into this crunch type of position, right? Now that is one extreme of your pelvic motion. That's called a posterior pelvic tilt. The other extreme is if you rock your pelvis the other way. See if you can stick your tailbone back and arch your back a lot. So we fall into this position. And we're kind of hanging out on these ligaments in the front. We've got this arch in our back. Now, find somewhere in between. So kind of feel back and forth. Okay, so I can tuck here. I can arch here. So somewhere in between there is your neutral pelvis. And again, it's a range. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's not one tiny spot. It's a range, somewhere between those two extremes. I'll show you what I see most often. Most often in the clinic, I find people kind of tucked into this bum tucked under position and pelvis a little bit forward. Now I'm exaggerating, but this is very common after pregnancy because sometimes we adopt this posture during pregnancy just because of weight of baby. We're trying to kind of get it subconsciously up over our center of gravity. Then postpartum, we've got our kiddos, we're lifting groceries, we've got all these things we're holding that have some weight. So the body's tendency is to shift this way. But you can see what that does in my back, first of all, because now I'm kind of like this bow. Think about gravity pushing down on me. I'm like this bow and arrow. I don't have my stability. Not to mention that all my core musculature in the front is not, it's open. It's not at a good length tension relationship to fire. And I've got my pelvic floor inactive because of my tailbone is tucked. I've got my glutes inactive, or my powerhouse, because they're tucked under me. And I've got my transverse abdominis, my deep abdominals, not being able to pull from a very stable surface because my spine is all crunched down, and it starts in the back. So if you just kind of think about, if you're a mama and you've got little ones, or like I said, groceries, anything else, it's very common to find yourself in this position. Just think about, okay, let me see if I can untuck a little bit. And it's just shifting where your sit bones open up just a little bit, not to the other extreme, but they open up a little bit. And if you can see my hip bones, I just shifted them back. So now they're going straight down through my ankles. So I just stacked my blocks. My ankles, my knees, and my hips and pelvis. I just stacked them up. And the other direction, if you've got this type of posturing, this, a lot of times we used to teach this as kind of like that stand up straight and you pop your breasts forward and your shoulders back and you get into this kind of military position. That is flaring my ribs. Same situation in the front. Nothing's able to really work this way. My core is not set up to be firing. So just think about that. Okay, find your range, find your neutral-ish, and make sure you can rock back and forth a little bit and kind of settle pelvis over feet, okay? Already that should feel kind of good if you were in a different position. Now come up into your ribs. Same thing with your ribs. We have a range of motion. If you think of them like a bell, we've got this, this bowl above our pelvic bowl, this rib cavity. So we've got our ribs here, and more often than not, you're in one of the extremes where you can be kind of crunched down and rounded, right? And just kind of sitting in this sort of position. Or we get into this overextended position, right? So your bell can go this way, or it can go this way. So kind of play around with that and feel what that feels like in your body. And again, find that settling somewhere in your neutral. So your ribs, if you can imagine them like a bowl, an upside down bowl, they are dumping directly into your pelvis. That takes pressure off of any healing connective tissue in the front if you're struggling with diastasis recti or anything like that. It also sets up your inner core, so your pelvic floor, to fire with your breath. And it just makes your core work throughout the day and takes tension off all your joints and ligaments because now we're stacked. Speaking of the breath, feel what it feels like to breathe in these different positions, because sometimes people say, how do I know at home if I found neutral? And I always say, first of all, you should do this in front of a mirror. Play around, look at your own body and your own ranges, but find your breath. So if you're kind of tucked in and slumped, arms crossed, or just kind of find yourself in this position, take a deep breath there. So my bell is rung down. And just feel what it feels like. And conversely, overextend, go the other way, flare your ribs, open up through the front, and take a big breath this way. And just kind of feel where it goes. And now find that mid-range position where your ribs are over your pelvis, and take a breath there. And play around with that. What you should feel when you find that mid-range is that 360-degree breath that we talk about, where if my hands are around my ribs, imagine, and you feel breath to the front, the back, and the sides, kind of like that umbrella, and then coming back. That's a good diaphragmatic breath. That is what kicks in all of these systems and relaxes your muscles and all the other things. But that is what our body wants to access. And sometimes we get really stuck because of positions or just bodies, habits, and tendencies. So that can unlock a whole new world for you if you can play around with that and find that. And now coming up, shoulders. Again, we don't want them squeezed back because then we pop the ribs forward. So think about that rib position and just kind of broaden your collarbones. Make sure your ears are away from your shoulders. You can even think about where your hands are, because if you have your hands naturally kind of turned in like this, you know your shoulders are rotated forward. Your hands naturally, when they fall, you want them open toward the front, or at least going in that direction. That's that rotation of the shoulder. Nice broad collarbones, shoulders away from ears. And then in the head, all it is, imagining lift up, like you're getting a string pulled from the back, kind of the top of your head and the back. So you're lengthening upward toward the ceiling. Your chin should come in a little bit. So from the side, instead of being in this forward chin position, you want your chin in, kind of like a double chin, moving your ears back over your shoulders. And again, we're not going to stay in this extreme because that would be weird and unnatural also. But just thinking about that direction and that lift through the top of your head. So grow in any position. What all these inner muscles do that are not just in your core, but our whole body has these positioning, these stabilizing muscles that kind of hold us against movement and against gravity. And so if you're standing or in any other position and you just think, okay, let me just grow and find space in my spine, a millimeter of space in my joints, and just grow a little bit, you're kind of going to automatically come up and stack your blocks versus being, succumbing to gravity. So think about that growth. So there you have it. That's kind of, up and down the line, just things to start to consider. Again, don't get frustrated with yourself because it's not about being perfect. And your body adjusts to movements. So when you are changing them, a lot of times when I put people in this position, they feel weird. They feel like they're gonna fall forward or just that they're not in the right alignment. But that's because all of our nerves, our muscles, inner ear even, our eyes, everything is used to our own body and our own habits. So just kind of checking in every once in a while, maybe during still times in the day, like when you're on a grocery line or, standing and cooking, just times when you can think like, oh, wait a minute, where's my body? Let me just check in and see where I am and maybe make a little bit of a shift. But once you can find this consistently in your day, which takes work and it takes time, but when you can find this positioning, your muscles, your core, your pelvic floor, your breathing diaphragm, your breath, all these things that we talk about will get used just more naturally during the day. So it just opens things up. It gives you back muscles. It gives you back breath. So just start paying attention and considering and noticing if it changes any of your symptoms that you're having.